Well, hello, everyone. I'm Bobby Ross. I'm the weekend plug-in columnist for Religion Unplugged, as well as the editor of the Christian Chronicle newspaper. I'm here in my office in Oklahoma City, and we're joined by Bob, whose last name I always butcher, Smietana. How do you say it, Bob?
Smietana.
Smietana. One of these days, I am going to get that. Bob is a longtime religion writer, editor. He's a national correspondent for Religion News Service. And we're here to talk about his new book called Reorganized Religion, the Reshaping of the American Church and Why It Matters. I believe the official release date is August 30th. Is that right,
Yeah,
Bob?
it's out Tuesday. And look at that book. Isn't that a pretty book? You should just buy it just because
It
it's so
really
good
is a pretty book. You should make a cake that looks like this
We
book. That
did.
would
If
be
I could
cool.
show you. My daughter made a cake for us. It was so yummy. And she works at a bakery, and she decorates cake for a living. And she made this cake. It was exact replica, and it was so good. So I ate my words.
And when I write this article that goes with the video, I'll be sure to include a picture of the cake because it really is it really is a cool cake. Well, Bob, tell me, I guess, how this book came about after all your years in journalism.
Yeah, it came about. I had one aha moment a few years ago. I was covering a disaster, and as you faith-based disaster relief is a huge thing. So there's a disaster, there's a tornado, a hurricane, usually a bunch of church folks and other religious folks show up, and they cook meals and they clear trees and they help people rebuild their houses and put their lives back together. And I this time I was on the phone with someone who's organizing some things after a hurricane, and I hang up the phone, and in my email box pops another story. It says, on the decline of religion in America and the rise of the nuns, who are the folks who claim no religious affiliation. And something in my head went, oh, wait, all those people doing this faith-based disaster relief are usually older church folks, most of them, many of them white. All those denominations are declining. There's no one in the pipeline to replace those folks when they get older in 10, 20, 30 years, and they're gone. So that was kind of an aha moment to say we should probably focus on this more. And then I think the kind of broader picture of the American religious landscape and all the changes happening all at the same time.
And so how long did it take you to put this together?
So it took me, that's a good question. There are parts of the book, there's a story in the book that I started writing in 2008. But really, this one, I signed the contract in the spring of 2021 and finished it by the end. So it was kind of a fast, it was like a pitch for years. And then, oh, you want this? Okay. Can we have it in 7 months? Which was great. So it's the only downside is that we had Omicron in the middle of it. So I'd hoped to travel a little more and wasn't able to do that. But it was a pretty fast approach. I got a lot of help from a lot of ministers and other clergy who sent me great stories of local congregations, and but it was fun. It was really fun to do.
Yeah, and the thing that I guess, I'll be honest, I have not had time to read it word for word yet, but I have scanned it pretty quickly. And the interesting thing to me is just how timely there's a lot in here about COVID-19 and kind of how that's affected churches. There's a lot in here about the 2020 election and political division and how that's affected churches, religious bodies. I mean, obviously there's a lot of the demographic kind of things about, how churches are changing racially and otherwise, but I guess you must be a journalist used to working on tight deadlines, because there really is a lot of contemporary information in here that is, it's really relevant, which you don't always see, I think, in a book that's, because the book process is a lot longer process than putting, a nightly story on the RNS wire or something like that.
Yeah, we were updating data as we're doing copy edits, collecting, checking spellings and all the copy editing. We're also, so new data came out. Yeah, I wanted to that's one reason we did it so fast, is to say what is happening right now that can help people understand what's happening. So, it has some of the big picture stuff. So one of the things that I found really striking is I started covering religion in 1999, back in the, like you are from the other millennium. And the average congregation was 137 people, which is a good size people. You can kind of keep a budget, keep a minister, fund things. Well, the average congregation now, the median congregation is 65 people. That's like dropped in half in 20 years. So you have that kind of all decline. And then you have the kind of like all the things happening at the same time. There's a line in there which I stole from a science fiction writer named John Scalzi, who's got a book about old people who join the army, which is really good. But the guy says, why do we join the army? Because they're going to make us young. And he describes being old as it's not one thing after another. It's everything going wrong all at the same time. And that's really what's happening to folks now, is everything is changing all at the same time. So we wanted to give people, sometimes people think their congregation is declining and they think, well, we should just fire our pastor, or we should just try some new songs, or we should try some other new program, and that's going to change it. And what they don't realize is that they are being affected by a changing sort of ecosystem around them, where the demographics and social ideas and trust in institution and all kinds of other changes, and then COVID and an election all are happening at the same time. So they're trying to navigate a very complex situation.
Right. And one of the fascinating things, I know you've reported this some on RNS, but you get into a lot of detail in the book about just the mini churches versus mega churches, and the fact that most of the churches out there now are these smaller, under 65 type churches, but most of the people are in mega churches where, in the little church where you've got 20, 30 people, everybody's going to be called upon to do something, whereas other people may be in more of a, you're sitting there with 3,000 people in a big auditorium. It's more of a spectator, religion is not a sport so much, but it's more, you're either somewhere that's declining, or you're somewhere that's big, but maybe is a part of the decline and we don't even notice it on the surface.
Yeah, Mark Chavez Mark Chavez from Duke has this great insight that he thinks that the rise of megachurches in some ways is a sign of decline, because those churches, they bring a lot of people together, but people give less, they attend less, and they volunteer less. And I think those large churches are starting to realize that now. I was talking to a minister from a very large church the other day, and the problem is that religion can be turned into content. We use that word a lot. Well, and you consume it. Well, and very large churches often grew by having great music and great speakers. Well, all of a sudden during COVID, you realize you could get great music and a great sermon on your couch, and you can get it on your phone. So why get up and go to a place to consume the content that you can do somewhere else? So they are rethinking, wait, we have to re-engage our congregation. We have to think, what are we doing here? Why are we bringing people in? So I think there is some rethinking now of, wait, is this a great way of doing church? Not that there won't be big churches, but are we building congregations? Are we building communities? Or are we just, giving them great content? And I think that's going to be a very interesting challenge right now, because people like to go to big churches. But the one thing about those big churches is they're not always in places where people live. So you got to drive to them. So like in my community, I live in a small town outside of Chicago. There's a group of little churches that started a food pantry, because during COVID, the food pantry lost its building, shut down. So they started, with the help of a local food bank, started this mobile food pantry, where every 2 weeks, they basically set up the parking lot as a food bank. And all these older volunteers come, they set it up, people drive through, and hundreds of families every week get this. Well, they can do that because they're in the neighborhood, right? They're in the community. If the local megachurch do it, you'd be driving 20, 30 miles. So I think one thing that I wanted to get at this book is the human side of religion. We think about theology, we think about celebrity pastors and money and social issues, but we don't always think about the human side of this, the way it affects congregations and communities and individuals. And that's one thing I want to get at. With all this data, I want to say this is a really important part of our culture and people's lives and our communities. And if it keeps declining, it won't be there. And then when people have needs or people want community, they won't be able to find it.
And that's one of the things the book does an excellent job at, is you have those statistics, you kind of really lay it out there, but every chapter has like real people and real scenarios that really kind of help bring home the point that you're trying to make. And the other thing that is cool about the book is you get to see it's not just like it's not a straight news story. It really is a book, Bob, where you talk about your own self, how religion has been positive and negative in your life. I mean, you even talk about, you lost a brother, and I mean, which I think maybe I'd heard before but hadn't remembered. And it's just real compelling stuff.
Yeah, I realized I couldn't try and convince people why they should care about organized religion in churches without saying, here's why I care about it. And yeah, when my younger brother died unexpectedly, he was 39. It was a real blow. And we had these close friends from church who just rallied around us, and they brought us meals, and they paid for our plane tickets to go to the funeral, and they really rallied around us. And this happens all the time to people, right? When their lives fall apart, it is congregations and their communities that rally to them. So it's not just like, you just don't go to, sometimes like politics is really interesting and it's important. And we have a lot of politics going. I cover a lot of politics and I cover all these things, but that's not why people go to church. That's not always why people are part of communities. They go because they want to be part of a community, and when life falls apart, that's who comes running to help. And that's what I worry is going to get lost for people. In fact, if I was a pastor now, I suppose I would be spending all my time either trying to invite new people to come or making sure anyone who came could get connected and make friends there, because that's a kind of a missing piece. And if you don't have that, then you don't have, when things go bad, then you have no one to come to your assistance. Or when someone else's life goes bad, you don't have a channel. One of the nice things about organized religion is it's organized. So there's a kind of response to this decline of organized religion. One is to say good riddance, right? There are people who say religion is bad, if church is closed, that's really great. There are other people who are like purifiers, who say, well, anyone who drops out of congregational life wasn't really a good believer. They weren't really a Christian or whatever, or Muslim or Jew. So good riddance to them as well. And I think those both miss this kind of idea of how important these congregations are. So in the book, I talk about moving to our new house, which is great, but the kitchen's real small. And we could make the kitchen bigger by taking out a wall between that and the living room, but then the roof would cave in, which would be a bad thing. And I sort of say, this is like churches and other houses of worship are kind of a bearing wall for our culture. And if you knock it out, don't put something in its place, the roof will cave in.
I enjoyed that part of it. Not quite sure how to ask this question. I guess in reading the book, it's almost like how to, this is where demographics are. This is where in our society, we need religion because we need people to go to disasters. We need people to bring meals. I mean, is there any part of kind of looking at it like that misses the spiritual element,
sure,
or misses the Holy, the Holy Spirit's role in things, if you believe in the Holy Spirit?
Yeah. So it could sound instrumental. I really am not making an argument that we should have these things because they're useful. I would say they're important. Yeah. So in the beginning of the book, I sort of lay out that because I'm a journalist and reporter, and I'm not a pastor. So I don't want to tell people how they should practice, and it's hard to quantify what the Holy Spirit's doing. It is this is really about the human side of it. But yeah, there are all kinds of new things happening, which is really, really interesting. So one of the stories early in the book, I talk about the decline of this older congregation, and they end up in part because of COVID, in part because their congregation, it was a new church start that never went anywhere. And then all of a sudden it was a 50-year-old church that had really never gone anywhere. And they had a nice building, and they finally decided, look, this is not sustainable. They end up selling to a very big, large church that was mostly African immigrants. So that church is now still there. It's just very different. So those kind of things happen all the time. Actually, one of my other favorite stories in the book is, I think every story is my favorite story, but one about this, this is from a few years ago, but there's another little congregation that split. They were going to close, and all of a sudden these refugees from Myanmar show up, and they need a place to worship. And the pastor, who's the interim pastor, says, well, we're going to close now. And they're like, well, we still need a place to worship. And these refugees from Myanmar end up saving the community. So there's all kinds of, in fact, this church right behind me, that's a church that was very important in my wife and I's life for years. It's 120 years old, several points in their lives, they sort of were almost closed. Back in the 80s, they were about to close, and then a bunch of the new pastor started inviting his friends, and they had 30 more years of life. Now they are going to actually close and sell the building to start new churches. But they've had this kind of, so you never know when something new is going to happen. But I think it helps to understand the environment that you're in and the ecosystem, and that makes you make better decisions, I think. So I'll tell you one more thing, and I know I'm talking.
Okay. No, you're great.
There's one thing. So somebody looked at the book and said it's a kind of a glass is half empty view. And I was like, I don't know about that, because I'm pretty hopeful. But also I think that's the wrong question. Like, one thing I would say is, like, religion is like a glass of water. It's really good, or Christianity, it's really good. But the glass we have is breaking. And sometimes people are doing things to break it. So if the water is going to spill out, we won't have a place to contain it. And the pipeline for getting water to that glass is changed. The wells run dry, and you're going to have to find new places to connect with new people. It's not that God isn't working. It's perhaps that the systems that people use to organize people who find God aren't working. If that makes sense. So I'm not a theologian, but that's my kind of like theology. It's God is doing all kinds of things, but is your congregation paying attention? Is your congregation have to change? And sometimes part of this minister of this church said to me, you can't get to resurrection without death. And I thought, oh, that's a good line. That's a good pastoral line. I could use that, right? You might not have change, but things may have to end, and that can be difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, like the whole church life cycles. People have cycles, and churches have cycles. I guess, would there be like 3, 4, 5 takeaways that you think that you would see coming from this book?
Yeah. So one of them would be just to realize that everything is changing all at the same time, and to really take stock of the place you're at. So that's one, to know that, all these kind of things. The second would be that one reason we have all these political debates is that we have this generational shift. So if you're a Christian in America and you're over 65, you're mostly Protestant and you're mostly white. If you're under 35, you are diverse. It's probably half white and half not white. And that is a huge difference. So your congregation is going to be, if it's going to reflect the community, it's going to be much more diverse. And that's going to bring challenges, because especially around politics, because folks from different backgrounds see politics differently. I think another would be is just to kind of revel in the importance of religion in America and churches, that what people do is really important. It really matters. And then I think one other takeaway, and this is one that is that what people do now in their congregations matters, not just now, but years from now. and generations to come. So I tell the story in the book about my mom, who was a daughter of immigrants. They didn't have any money for her to go to college. She was going to go to work at a knitting mill in Fall River, Massachusetts. And if you know anything about the textile industry in Massachusetts, you know that none of those exist anymore, and it collapsed pretty quickly. But she gets a scholarship to a hospital which has a nursing program, and she becomes a nurse, and she was very successful, and it really changed the course of her life. Well, this hospital, and my mom was Catholic, so this hospital was started by Episcopalians in the 1800s, who probably were not too fond of Catholics, because in the 1950s, when my mom got the scholarship, if you looked at both the Christian Century and the Christianity Today, two major Christian magazines, they had these stories about what if the Catholics win. Basically, it was Catholics are going to take over the country and destroy it. The kind of really menaced. So my mom was the enemy to these folks. And yet these Episcopalians in the 1800s build a hospital, which starts a nursing school. And then decades later, it comes along and offers my mom a lifeline. So what I took away from that is that, oh, we are all living downhill from decisions other people made on our behalf, and they didn't know us. And so the decisions that folks make now on their congregations and faith-based groups will affect the future. So they're not just after the kind of thriving of themselves and their community, but they're also going to have long-term impacts.
What, I guess, having researched this book and in your time as a religion journalist, what stories do you think that we religion journalists are missing that we should probably focus more on?
I wish we could get more human stories, just about how faith impacts people, why they're making decisions they make, what's driving those things, particularly when, not always when life goes bad, but a lot of times when life goes bad and they kind of face difficult times. We don't get the reasons why people keep showing up, I think, enough.
And
we don't get and we don't get the kinds of the small congregations are doing all these amazing things. These are hard to get at. I wish I could have if I go to every seminary in the country and tell them how to relate to journalists, I would be like, pay attention to what's happening. So this church that was saved by immigrants, or refugees, I only found out because I was interviewing the pastor of a large church in the area. They had a new pastor, interviewing them. And we finished the interview, and then he kind of said, if after an interview you sit and drink coffee and you're still talking, and then he says, yeah, I'm off to a meeting about this church that was saved by refugees. And I'm like, oh, what? That was the lead to the interview. We're supporting a church saved by refugees. And this was in a time in Nashville where there was a lot of anti-immigrant and anti-refugee rhetoric, and this was a great story. So there are great stories in all these congregations. So, if you visit folks, you just find these wonderful things. So I think it's easy to focus on the political and harder to focus on the other reasons why people are part of congregations. And we can focus on what's going wrong. I cover scandal all the time. But I think we could do more. I think Twitter and social media have made us more celebrity and politics conscious and less people conscious.
Bob, where can people get a copy of the book?
You can go to Amazon. You can go to IndieBound, which is IndieBound is a place you can order from your local bookstores. A lot of local bookstores can order it for you if they haven't stocked it. If you actually go to a place called Read Between the Lines, LYNES, that's in my hometown of Woodstock, Illinois, they will order you a copy. If you also look up Worthy Publishing, that's the publishing company, and my name, they have a link to all the places you can order it. But it's pretty much everywhere you can get a book, you can get this one. And I would say one other thing, not only is the cover beautiful, the design on the inside of the book is really nice. I don't know about you, because you're very young, Bobby, but I'm old. My eyes are old. And, I don't like, it's not, the font and the layout of the book are really easy on the eyes. They're lovely. It's really nice to read.
I was going to show you at some point. I decided I would mark the the places that I thought there was good stuff. And then I got to this point and I'm like, I'm marking every single paragraph.
This is cool.
So let's
That's the
just
happiest thing.
give up.
I'm the happiest person in the world. Because
Well,
you send a book out in the world, you wish, hope people will read it, like it, or at least, respond to it. So that makes me very happy.
well, good. Well, thank you so much, Bob. I really appreciate your
It was
time.
fun to talk with you, and thanks for doing something on this.
Oh, you're welcome. Talk to you later.
Talk to you later.